Hello and welcome back to the first of two videos on the Newark Tower section of the SOP. The first one's going to be on most of the IFR stuff, pretty much every tab except for the VFR procedures, and then we're going to spend the second one talking about VFR procedures, the skyline route, and all the different things you can do there. So first of all, I'm going to run through most stuff, but I'm going to omit some things or not fully explain some things just for the sake of time, because there are some things that are either very uncommon or very self-explanatory that don't need explaining. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask either in the Discord or by messaging me. So we're going to start with just the tower procedures. Of course, it's major N90 airport, so we have automatic releases unless otherwise coordinated from N90. Standard separation is anticipated radar separation, but we use timed for wake turbulence when it is a factor. We are ARTS and LRAC certified, meaning we're going to radar identify all VFR departures and basically all VFR aircraft in our airspace, but we don't radar identify any VFR departures. We just hand them over to departure once they're clear of traffic and on whatever procedure or heading they needed to be on. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit. For aircraft exiting the runway, remember that we do have parallel runways, and you always land the one farther away from the terminals. So if we're either landing 2 left or 4 right most of the time. So most of the time when someone lands, they're going to exit the runway, and they stay with you until they cross the departing runway. So you own all the taxiways between the departing and the arriving runway, meaning you have to cross them and then hand them off to ground on the other side. They're still your responsibility until they're on the other side of the runway handed off to ground. Parallel runways, the 4 left and 4 right, 2 right, 2 left are 950 feet apart, so they're considered the same runway for wake turbulence. So keep that in mind when you're using separation for departures or arrivals in both. We can land 4 left and 4 right simultaneously. It doesn't happen that often, but there's more information in the TRACON section if needed. And anytime we'd be running it, really, it would already be pre-coordinated, so you would get more information then, basically. For intersecting runways, we can land 2 left and 1 or 4 right and 1 simultaneously. You'll notice we do have 2 left and 1 is sometimes called CRDA. Again, any use of the ILS 11 as the standard operating arrival, like the ILS 11 approach in the ATIS, has to be approved by the TMU. So it's not standard. If you look, we'll show it in a second, but if you look at runway selection, there is no runway selection where 11 is used as a primary runway. So it would just be at the TMU's discretion if we need it. But we can land both 2 left and 4 right simultaneously with 11. So the separation for 2 left and 1 is with the TRACON, but it has to be monitored by the tower, and that's CRDA with the TRACON, and then it's handed off to tower. 4 right and 1 we have to have land and hold short procedures. We talk about that a little bit in a second. And we can do operations at 2 right at Whiskey and 2-9 as long as 2 right is not a heavy jet. We do something that is in the runway selection is circling to 2-9, either on the 4s or the 2-2s. But instead of just saying circling, they're going to specifically fly one of these 2 approaches. So if it's 4 right to 2-9, it's the bridge visual. If it's 2 left to 2-9, it's the stadium visual. That's already in VATIS, so if you pull up the profile for running like 2 right and 2-9er, it'll automatically put in the stadium visual for you, and vice versa for 4s. Simultaneous approaches, we can do 2-9er and 4 right, and we talk about that a little bit more later on. But when we're using 4 right as a overflow runway, we'll be using the RNAV X-ray for 2-9, and this is, again, something only approved by the TMU. It's for overflow procedures, so it's very it's definitely not a standard procedure. You're not going to see it that often, but we'll talk over it a little bit just so you understand what it means. And again, this is talking about before, but large turbojets and heavy jets, if they're going off 2 right full length from Whiskey, the 2-9 arrival has to be it has to be outwards of a 1 mile final. So you can't use the same separation as you would for another one. Line up and wait. The standard rule is just one aircraft at a time can line up and wait. But if you are lining up and waiting an aircraft in front of someone, a landing aircraft who has already been cleared to land, we can do this in certain circumstances. If you know Newark, it's fairly uncommon for that to be needed. And so the main two things is if it was either a one runway configuration, so either because maybe we were simulating real world ops. I remember one time when we had the snowstorms recently, we were only running one of the runways just to simulate what they were doing in real world. But also say you've got like a unstandard approach that's been coordinated, or like a VFR aircraft who wants to land on an arrival runway. That if that's been coordinated, that's fine. You are allowed to line up and wait in front of them while they're clear to land if the ceiling is greater than 800 feet and the visibility is greater than 2 miles. Land and hold short operations. Here are the conditions that have to be met. This one specifically is important, so people are expecting it when they're coming in on the approach. But here are all the different configs when we could run it. You'll notice some of them like 1-1, so 1-1 arrivals. A lot of these, or a lot of these are going to be like at a TMU's discretion, so we wouldn't, like if it was 4 right and 1-1 or something like that, we wouldn't run that typically. So again, these landing distances are good to know, but most of the time you're not going to be doing landing and hold shorts, just so you know. Runway selection, you've seen this before at Philly or whatever other airports you've been at. It's pretty common. As you'll see, runway 11 does not appear here, so it'll only be used at TMU's discretion. And we do have some operations where we're using circling to 29, so the bridge or the stadium visual right there. So here, the use of ILS runway 11 or RNAV GPS X-ray runway 29er approaches are only allowed with the TMU's approval. So again, these things will probably be known in advance that we're going to use them. They will be pre-coordinated, and we'll discuss all the intricacies of them at that date, and you'll have time to prepare for it, basically. So don't worry about knowing the ins and outs of this procedure on the daily basis. Other than that, there is some interaction with other N90. If we're running the RNAV X-ray 29, then LaGuardia has to do localizer 3-1, and therefore Kennedy must be on 3-1s. And Teterboro also must use the RNAV GPS X-ray runway 6. So not specific to Newark ops, but it does affect a lot of other people, so coordination would definitely have to occur. But it would already, because it's TMU's approval. Let's see. Departure headings. So all these instructions are going to be given to aircraft not on a departure procedure. So say someone could not accept the Newark 4, they don't have charts, something like that. This is what you'd use. But most of the time, someone can accept the Newark 4, maybe even the Port 4 if they're stubborn and are only requesting the Port 4. But if they're on one of those, do not use these procedures. Don't tell them to fly a heading if they're on the departure procedure. It's just a waste of your time. Either way, if they're on a departure procedure or not, you need to make sure they actually fly it before you hand them off to departure, and that they're clear of aircraft. So any traffic in the airspace, you need to make sure they're clear before you can hand off to the next controller. So let's say you cleared someone from the Newark 4. You don't have to use any of these procedures. You can just have them fly the Newark 4. So you don't have to say that on departure. You could just say wind whatever, runway 4 left or runway 22 left, or 22 right at whiskey, clear for takeoff. Or Yankee if we were running 22 right at Yankee, but generally. If you're giving them a takeoff clearance, normally you could just clear them for takeoff. They're already cleared by that. And if you see them doing the initial turn, so for the 4s, it would be a right turn heading 060. Or if you see that left turn on the 22s for a heading of 190, or say for some reason we're running 29 or 11, very not standard ops, they're making that right, that left 060 on 11, or that left 265 on 29. If you see those turns being initiated by the pilot, you don't have to do anything else because they're flying the Newark for departure. You can hand it off to departure. You don't have to wait for them to turn back at 4 DME, and especially don't wait for them to turn back at 4 DME, especially if they're at Eastgate, because that's just going to make departure's life a whole lot worse because they're already turning back. Departure has to turn them back to the right, and it's a whole big deal. Something else that we added, so this is for anybody on a departure procedure or anybody not on a departure procedure. if NWK is offline and not covered by anyone, but tower is online and LSO is online or covered by another controller, so that's the primary departure out of LaGuardia, but it could be covered by, let's say, CAM was online, the primary approach for Kennedy, and they also had their LSO or HARP certs. They could be covering it on a different frequency, so again, that's when you coordinate, check controller ATISes, all that good stuff. Make sure you know who's controlling what. But let's say LSO is online, NWK is offline, and tower is online. If you know NWK, you've trained NWK at all, you know that NWK hands off to LSO very quickly for all Eastgate or ship and wavy departures. And therefore, if NWK is offline and LSO is online, we've made new procedures, so when an aircraft departs, tower gives the turn that departure would usually give, and sends them over to LSO as the departure controller. So if you remember from the delivery and ground section, we gave their departure frequency as LSO if these conditions were met. And now you just want to make sure you give these headings. So it's going to be 040, 040, and 040 for 4s, 2 2s, and 1 1s, and then 060 for 2 9er. And the only thing to note here is on the 2 2s, you really need to make sure that when you say 040, it's a right turn. And you just need to make sure they're making that right turn so they're not busting LaGuardia airspace with the SUL on the left side, or on the east side, rather. So there's multiple ways you can do this. You can either just make it very clear to the pilot that it's a right turn, observe them turning right, and then it's okay. Or you could give them sort of an intermediate heading, say, let's say United 123, turn right heading 360. Right, you give them an intermediate turn, they start a turn to the right, and then once you see them, like, turning that way, right, they're going the right direction, you give them another turn right heading 040 to make sure they don't spin all the way around the left side. There's multiple ways of doing it. As long as they're making that right turn, you're doing your job right. And once you see them turning, you can hand them off to departure, which would be LSO or whoever's covering it. For missed approach procedures, everyone except for 2 9er departures, or excuse me, arrivals are going to get 2,500 as the altitude, but 3,000 is for 2 9er. And the standard is just runway heading up to 2,500, and then once they're at the opposite end of the runway, they're going to be given a right or left turn depending on what runway you're using. So for 4 right, it would be right 06, sort of emulates the Newark 4. For 1-1, it's either 060 or 220 depending on the ops, and for 22 for 22 left, it's heading 190. So again, sort of emulating the Newark 4 with that left turn. Another thing is what's very easy to do if you have a simultaneous departure as someone's going around, so you don't lose separation. You'll notice these headings for the 4s and the 2 2s are diverging from runway heading. So what you could do is coordinate with departure, give the departure off the parallel runway, so the 4 left or 2 right at Whiskey departure, runway heading instead of the Newark 4 departure, and then let the go around turn left to emulate the Newark 4. Or let's say the go around was in front of the departure for some reason. You could let the go around fly runway heading and continue flying runway heading and have the departure fly the Newark 4. So that'll help you get diverging separation on them. Just make sure you coordinate it with departure because this is the standard. If it's not coordinated, this is the standard, but you should always coordinate it go around. Last thing is airspace delegation. So we have the southwest and the northeast flow. You'll notice there's this other one, we'll talk about this in a second, but it's fairly simple. Southwest, northeast, right? There's not much complicated. The only thing to note is this one weather is VFR because you have your Teterboro arrivals flow for running the ILS runway 6 right here. And then the only thing to note as well, if we're on the northeast flow and we're running overflow ops for 2 9er, so that would be ILS 4 right and the RNAV GPS X-ray into 2 9er, you gain this airspace right here from LaGuardia. So you do not own this one. This is given to NFI, the final vectors. Not this one, just ignore this, but just this airspace you're given because they hand off to you around here and then they fly the approach right in here. So if we're ever running it, just you can look here or it's even in the approach section to note which airspace you gain. But again, this is only approved by the TMU, so you're not going to see it that often. And yeah, that's it. Again, post any questions in the Discord or you can email me if you see any problems with the video. And in the next video, we'll continue talking about tower ops, but specifically VFR procedures and the skyline and what to do there. So I'll see you then.